Hello, everyone, and welcome into crushthestreet.com. I am Kenneth Amanduri, and I'm joined today with Omar Bahm of Crypto's News, Crypt0 on YouTube. Total celebrity in my mind when it comes to cryptocurrency, the news, and my goodness, just seeing this resurgence in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin at all-time highs, $23,000 at the moment, and Ethereum moving up, but not at its all-time highs. Maybe an opportunity there to bridge the gap between Bitcoin's move and what we can expect with some other cryptocurrencies, but just so much to talk about. It's been a really wild ride this year. I mean, we saw Bitcoin in the $3,000 range in March, and to have gone through that crash and to actually be holding on to some Bitcoin here at the end of 2020 really took some guts. I mean, and hopefully you were able to do that. Hopefully you were able to buy the dip. But my goodness, we're all humans having to watch what happened in March to our crypto and to the markets. It's not easy. So let's chat. Omar, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Thank you so much, Kenneth. As you know, I used to watch your show even before I started my show. I thought it was the guests that you hosted were incredible. The discussions were always thought arousing. I would most of the time, embarrassingly, maybe listen to them in the shower. I'm sure many people do with waterproof phones these days.
Tweeting on the toilet.
Yeah, I probably spent too much time there. They're more embarrassed. I mean, more embarrassed to say that I can estimate. But anyway, yeah, I'm super excited to be here. I always find the quality, again, of the content to be incredible on Crush the Street. And I always recommend you guys.
Well, thanks for the kind words. And, I love talking with you and just, I think seeing where we are with crypto and Bitcoin is a testament to the work that you do. And, I think in 2018, going into 2019, watching what happened, it really took guts. It really took resilience to go all in on it, and that's something that you've done. And I'm super grateful to have been able to be involved in the space and hold on, because so many people thought this was tulip bubble. And we were talking about Peter Schiff before, and he's just got a tweet time and time again. Every time Bitcoin moves, every time it crashes, I keep thinking, Bitcoin's going to move from 50,000 to 40,000, and he's going to be the first one to go, see, I told you can't trust it. You know what I mean? And it's so disingenuous, but it just goes to show the longevity, and that Bitcoin's anti-fragile nature is still continuing to move forward.
We have an extremely unique asset class. I think it's hard for folks to grasp that we can possibly be alive during such a monumental shift from the old generation of money. And one of the biggest advances that we're seeing right now, as we've discussed, I mean, programmable money on Ethereum is extremely exciting. And I would say it's providing some of the biggest revolutions outside of the derivatives we saw, obviously, in Wall Street and outside of that. And it opens it up to everybody. I mean, whether there are regulations or not, the code doesn't necessarily listen to what governments have to say. Any anonymous developer could write that code. And if folks feel like they want to interact with a smart contract, be it to borrow, be it to lend and earn interest, because there's demand for borrowing, to be able to get interest in some other app, for example. I mean, this is incredible what we're seeing, because this idea of programmable money that can interact across all these different ecosystems, being the different smart contracts and decentralized applications, which I don't know if we should still call dApps at this point or call apps. I've been seeing some discussion about that. I know I've wanted to call myself apps, but maybe that's only because I've been so crypto native for quite some time. But to see how they can actually work and provide value to folks is incredible after all these promises. And sure, there are still scams. So I always advise caution. In fact, for DeFi, it's still so early in this early maturation part of it, where I do find it difficult to recommend anyone try it at all. There's all sorts of issues with it. For example, when it comes to impermanence loss, when you decide to lend crypto, you might get an interest, sure. But since you lent it out, it's not technically under your custody. The price of the underlying crypto can change. And by the time you get that crypto back, you're due less of it because the dollar price might have gone up or down. And so I think a lot of that isn't completely understood. Plus gas fees, we're still not scalable yet. Obviously, Ethereum, you mentioned before, has been moving forward, maybe even getting ready to rival Bitcoin. But it has taken a big step with staking and all of that. I don't know if you heard yesterday, actually, Kenneth, but CME is going to be launching futures for Ether. Back in 2017, they had said that they were focused on Bitcoin and they didn't comment on any other cryptocurrencies. Yesterday, they announced that they're going to have a contract for Ether. And to me, that's incredible because when we launched the Bitcoin futures, that was in 2017. And in 2017, it was at the peak of market euphoria. We'd already been climbing for, I don't know, for most, it might have been about a year, but I'd been watching it slowly move upward since 2015, gradually, and drop off, kind of like the early parts of this bull market that we're seeing right now. But right at that peak in 2017, that's when it finally launched after having been announced previous to that. And previous to that, it ran from 6K up to 20K Bitcoin when it finally launched. The bubble then popped. But I wonder I wonder if you even have some thoughts about this. What kind of impact we're going to see now, seeing that Bitcoin has $1 billion worth of value in positions there on these futures markets. But we're getting in this perhaps early part of this bull run, we're getting Ether launching futures. And if that's going to be a catalyst that could potentially rocket Ether up to its old all-time high around $1,400, since we saw Bitcoin go to $20,000. And for me, I'm suspecting it'll probably breach beyond $1,400 and climb much higher. So it's one of the best plays that you can do outside of Bitcoin, I think, is Ether, because you can see the institutional adoption. You can see how Bitcoin has become that reserve asset that is integral to the entire sector. And there's always a trading pair for Bitcoin. But frequently that's already happening with Ethereum, because with Ethereum, you don't even have to go to a centralized exchange. You simply use an automated market maker like Uniswap. And with Uniswap, you can trade between any crypto that's built on Ethereum, and even tokens that aren't built on Ethereum. Those are called wrapped tokens. So for example, I could wrap some Bitcoin that gets locked up in the Bitcoin blockchain, cannot move it. Might be a centralized custodian that provides that service, and then mints this wrapped BTC token. And that is an ERC20 token. And that can suddenly be traded against Ether. So I'm seeing Ether almost as almost becoming more integral to this sector. Obviously, it's quite risky. People don't want to say, that is the future. I don't think just yet for all of crypto finance, but it's becoming harder to be an Ethereum killer these days. More and more, you have to be an Ethereum partner, and that's been great to see.
Well, I'm long Ethereum in this space, and just more general comments. I mean, watching what's happening with the adoption and the mainstream, Wall Street aspect of things, that's what's going to continue to bring people into the space. Now, the caveat to that is that we're seeing it move with the markets. We're seeing it move with Tesla. We're seeing it move with, these tech giants, which kind of bothers me in the sense that it's not moving because of the reasons we would want to have that position. We want to be diversified out of mainstream financialized assets, and the problems with what is going on in the world and watching everything crash with the markets in March. That's, I guess, what is frustrating, but I think it's going to recover and move beyond that just because of the early adoption. And like you said, it being out of the hands of government, the code aspects of things. But, I'm open to being wrong. If, to be honest with you, I don't know what the impacts of just, a certain administration or governments, rallying together and really going after the crypto community. Could that have a significant impact on the price in the short term? I suppose it actually could. And right now it's largely benefiting from mainstream adoption, which is part of the system at this point. So that's the caveat to that, but I'll pass it back to you.
Yes, I think my own understanding of that has changed a little bit as well. I remember listening to this smart entrepreneur tech guy. He's into crypto. His name is Balaji, and his website is Balaji is, but the I is one I. Balaji is with a J. And he was talking about how ideally what we would want in the future is not a crypto anarchy. We wouldn't just want to not have supply chains or not have everything work properly that way. What we want is crypto society. And that's why these tools are being built out. I think people are used to KYC at this point, and they're used to AML laws. They're used to registering at the bank. The first bank account you signed up for, you had to give away, obviously, your name and all of your details. So I don't think that's going to be too much of a detriment, since it seems that the most heavy-handed regulation we're getting right now in the United States is kind of mirroring what we just saw in France, where you have to do KYC if you're an exchange or a custodian on basically every sort of transaction, whether it's even less than 100 pounds entering the exchange or leaving the exchange. You're going to have to also verify who owns that particular wallet or address. And it seems that they're trying to do the same thing here in the United States, because the CEO of Coinbase, props Coinbase, they're getting ready for the IPO. And he talked about how he had heard rumors that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin and the administration before leaving were going to be rolling out regulations that would will have to verify these exchanges and services, any recipient of cryptocurrency. So the issue with that is obviously that how do you identify who's the recipient of that cryptocurrency when it is a smart contract? So it's almost like you would have to move it first if that were to pass, without changing the law in the way that we've heard about. You would have to probably withdraw first to your personal account, and then from there you could do whatever you want to with DeFi. What's difficult to me is understanding exactly how to pay taxes. I know it's a problem that a lot of people deal with and have to deal with, especially if you were pretty early, like myself, mining cryptocurrency. There were really no clear regulations. You were getting it, you were throwing it into other ICOs, or you were putting it into a wallet to trade in older DEXs that did exist, decentralized exchanges. It suddenly became very cumbersome to try to report that. And one thing that I haven't even heard reported very much about, for example, is if you're earning money on social media platforms like Steemit or Hive, if you're earning on there, then technically every single time someone tips you, that might be a taxable event. It all becomes extremely complicated. And I can almost guarantee there's no accountant that can help someone who's been in this space making moves before these regulations were clear enough. So I would really like to see almost like some sort of, I think a reset would be ideal once they finally set some sort of rules. I think that would be the best way to approach this, get everyone to actually comply, would be like, let's just reset the gains. I know that's probably not going to happen, but I think that would make it so much easier for individuals if they do pass those laws. At the same time, I don't think they really work because of, again, who owns that smart contract? Was it the company, the individual who created it? Do I just write the name of the smart contract when I'm withdrawing or something like that? It's too nuanced, I think, at this point to have, and it doesn't cover this regulation. Things like airdrops, they weren't really mentioned, or other ways of earning cryptocurrency. So at this point, I think it could be stifling, if not intimidating to folks. Why would they want to deal with this at all if they're making money on stocks? Or if Bitcoin is being called a scam by Peter Schiff, maybe it all is a scam. It just seems like too much of a headache. So some of those headaches are being taken away again because of some clear regulations, because of more services available, more on-ramps, more institutional custodians to a great degree. So for institutions especially, I think this is a great time to be getting into crypto, since it's almost like FOMO at this point that we talked about, the herd of institutions jumping on board. We were waiting for that first company to do it. Now we've had many firsts in many different ways. First big firms to suddenly custody crypto and offer services. American Express yesterday, investing announced by a company called Falcon X, which is an all-in-one platform for institutional traders. We had MasterCard and Visa as well getting involved, and many others, PayPal, obviously, Robinhood, Cash App. This is a different game than what we saw in 2017. It's no longer just for the anarchists and the terrorists and the money launderers anymore. There are people who really see this as a hedge for their treasury assets, for their own future for passing on wealth to future generations, especially if the same pattern we've seen before of Bitcoin just ripping and roaring after a halvening, it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. And I think the self-fulfilling prophecy that we're seeing could easily see Bitcoin climb over whatever X price, like $100,000, $150,000. And I'm not trying to be specific with the price, but it's just the reality of it is that when enough people expect something to happen, and it happens time and time again, these climbs in crypto, it's almost self-fulfilling. Even in the hands of this regulation and these rumors, you think that it would be sell this rumor right now, which is maybe why we saw that dip like 2 weeks ago, a slight dip, and then it climbed right back up because the market overall isn't really scared. They still feel like they're going to be making enough money in the long run here, or at least in the medium term. So I'm not super concerned about what that could do for the prices. I'm going to have to be honest. I would have said differently if it was a bear market or even just a year or two ago. But at this point, in the face of COVID, in the face of these regulations, I think it's like you said, it's anti-fragile. Even the price for Bitcoin, it always bounces back, unlike tulips.
Yeah, that's the truth. And I think that's what's going to continue to bring more people in it, because it's not going away. A guy like Peter Schiff, I mean, he's got to marry this idea that Bitcoin is a scam. And he's got a lot of people, I think, on the sidelines who didn't buy, who continue to reach out for that confirmation bias of, what's going on? Why am I not in Bitcoin? Should I be in Bitcoin? And they go get their answer in, the all infinite wisdom of Peter Schiff, who is a brilliant guy. I like Peter Schiff. I like listening to him. I form even a lot of my articulation from the way he delivers something. But the fact is he's continuously being wrong on Bitcoin. And I think he understands the worst case scenario of it. He understands that, sure, something else could come around and replace it in theory. That's like, again, a possibility of Bitcoin. It's early stage. It's, all of these things that could be reasons that make it speculative, and why it may be extremely volatile and go to zero. But I think he fails to realize the nuance of it, why it's continuing to grow, why there are more buyers than there are sellers. I mean, that's the ultimate fundamental as to why something goes up. And he misses the nuance of that. And I think a lot of people miss the nuance as to why Bitcoin is the one that's continuing to go. Here we are in 2020, and Bitcoin is still the dominator. And I think Ethereum's going to do well, but there's something special that you just have to acknowledge with Bitcoin having that first mover advantage that without having, overanalyzed Bitcoin, I understood like this is going to be around because it has something unique about it that isn't just going to be taken over easily. And it's the reason why Amazon and Tesla just continue to go up. When Tesla's a smaller car company than, Ford, GM, but it is what it is. You have to be open to being wrong. And I'm telling myself that because I'm reminded about that with the markets and how markets can, act irrationally and crazy.
Absolutely. I think about Bitcoin as almost like when you think about life and the way that we are on this planet, just what are the chances that we are on this, obviously that this planet was created, that life could arise, that it would evolve from this single-celled, whatever it was, single-celled organism, and that we are still here right now. That to me is almost unfathomable when I really start to think about how incredibly lucky we are to just be alive. And then you think about Bitcoin and you think about Satoshi Nakamoto. To me, that's one of the most beautiful things, because you think about the story of money and the stories that we tell. As my friends like to define it, everything that we tell is a story, and the story of Bitcoin is fascinating and extremely unique. And Bitcoin may not have been the one, honestly, but it came out of a very specific time when there was fears about economic collapse, obviously coming out, and you had the cypherpunk mailing list where they were experts in trying to digitize money and trying to create money that could not be copied and pasted, which had proven a problem forever. To make a distributed ledger that was not easily tampered, there had been experiments for a long time, for at least 2 or 3 decades prior to Bitcoin. But Bitcoin was the first one that solved the Byzantine generals problem, so that you could have all of these different generals who didn't have cell phones back in the day attack a city at the same time if they wanted to do so in unison for the best strategy, right? How do you get them all when they're all perhaps miles away with their little militias to attack at the same time? And so that was a problem that was solved with Bitcoin that was very, very unique, not necessarily digital money, because oftentimes Bitcoin is compared to digital money, like you might see in a video game like World of Warcraft or something, where gold can be printed into infinity. But it cannot, because of the specific way that it was created. And it was created, again, by an individual person, individual group, and they disappeared. They have 1 million Bitcoins in an account that seem like they will never move. And their story doesn't seem like it'll have a firm conclusion. It's almost like a divine act, the creation of Bitcoin, which if Bitcoin had come out similar to ICOs, there would have been a team when we saw the white paper for Bitcoin. There would have been a team, and they would have had incentives, maybe a vesting period, maybe not. Really cool idea. Let's try to make some money off of it. But no, it was, again, just something almost altruistic that was performed by an individual, just put out there. And without their backing since 2013, it has bloomed and bloomed and bloomed beyond that initial movement of creating good money, sound money for the future, into now institutions adopting it. And we had that middle phase where folks like you and I also probably heard about it. And it's just been that trend. How do you fight that trend? It's like trying to short a bull market. That is, you have to maybe learn from experience how not to do that, basically. But that's the problem I find with folks like Warren Buffett or Peter Schiff or Nouriel Roubini, is that they don't see the trend of adoption because they're so stuck in old ways and assuming that the old powers that be will always have control. But do they really have control right now? I don't know. I really don't know. But my bet there is on Bitcoin, because as I can see, inflation, it will be happening, and not necessarily will be happening right now, even though if you go to a fast food restaurant, it's pretty clear that inflation is happening, or groceries just in general. But if we're talking about the way they look at inflation, see it realized, we might see that a few years down the road. But I'm still trying to understand that myself in regards to modern monetary theory, because they expect that they can continue to print basically forever. But again, if we don't learn from the lessons of the past, that's been something that's happened in the past as well, and proposed by another expert. I was just listening, I can't even remember his name, to one of the godfathers on Real Vision, great channel as well. And he was talking a year ago about modern monetary theory, and listening to it, it's less a practice and more of just an analysis of where we are and how it all works. And then just trying to continue to pull the right levers on how the system has worked. But it doesn't mean that it's something that's necessarily going to be tenable into the distant future. And so to me, when I look at Bitcoin, it's much simpler. Most folks might think it's much more complicated, but as you know, Kenneth, when trying to understand bonds and interest rates and how money is actually created, Bitcoin, to me, the way it's created is way simpler. And in that elegance is just, if you were to try to explain how money works to a 10-year-old, it would be easier probably to start from Bitcoin than it would be to start with traditional money. And it's kind of the opposite as you get to the older age brackets and the older investors who already made their money. It's harder for them to erase what they already know and to start over and take away some of their assumptions about what money is and their biases, and to get them to try to understand this new asset class. So they usually start off from listening to peers who also haven't taken the time to understand it, besides maybe reading a thing or two and then just coming to their own conclusion. But I think it's a shame, and it's a disservice to, unfortunately, their followers, who at the very least could get an education, because Bitcoin wasn't the first one. It was just the innovator. And there are really amazing things going on right now across the entire industry.
So let's have some fun.
I'm having fun already.
Well, I'm having fun. I'm having a great time, but I'm going to have fun by listening to you try to answer this.
Okay.
last time Bitcoin was 20,000, we saw Ethereum within a very short period of time hit, close to 1,400, 1,300. Ethereum is 50% of its all-time high. Bitcoin goes to 50,000. I mean, where's Ethereum?
Bitcoin goes to 50,000. Where is Ethereum? That is the question, Kenneth. I again can't give exact specifics on the price because I don't know. So I just cannot. But when you look at Bitcoin, I think they both work together, and you kind of have to look at the flow. That's why people are looking at stock to flow for Bitcoin. The fact is we've printed a lot more Ethereum since 2017. We've also printed a lot of Bitcoin, but that got cut in half. Ethereum also had a few kind of halvenings, a third inning. I think it's only 1 or 2 ETH now per block reward. Back then it was closer to 5. So that's also had its own halvenings, but people don't like, obviously, that it's not capped, but that's just a talking point when you look at the economics of it all. What's exciting to me to see with Ethereum is that, like Bitcoin, there is a finite supply in a way, at least if we look at the amount that exists right now. And a lot of that is getting staked. 1.5% of all the ETH that has ever been printed has already been locked up in this staking contract. And that contract gets you a certain APY, depending how many other ETH are staked, right? So right now it's between 5 and 10%. I don't remember the exact amount, but 1.5% of the ETH, that's already pretty incredible to me. And that is a number that's continuing to grow by the day that gets staked. So if we continue along this trend right now, it actually is a negative inflation rate for Ethereum because you're seeing more being taken out of circulation. And how permanently is it taken out of circulation? That's until Ethereum 2.0 launches, obviously, and then that's when the code will be written so folks can actually withdraw and move ETH around. But till then, it's locked up. So that to me is really interesting because it shows me that there's a real serious confidence, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of confidence into staking ETH, because I know that I'm not going to want to sell during this bull run, because I only expect this bull run to last maybe a year or two. And the folks who are investing, I think, are very smart, and they've been around this for a long time. So they realize that I might not want to take gains here. I might want them in 5 to 10 years. I'm willing to lock up my ETH, not sell them at all during these next rallies, because I think it's going to be much, much higher at some other point in the future. So that to me alone is crazy. And also with DeFi, again, locking up over $1 billion into those protocols that are so new, that's more ETH being taken out of circulation. So you have to look at how much ETH is just being taken out of circulation or doesn't want to move. And you come to a number that actually probably puts it pretty close to Ethereum in the long run, and maybe even a better deflation rate than Ethereum when you consider the staking aspect of it and the fact that there are other upgrades coming to Ethereum like EIP 1559, which will take a lot of those fees that are paid over to the miners and burn them completely, while also making it so you can expect a certain reasonable price on what you're going to be paying to interact with a smart contract using your ETH or to move that ETH around. And so it'll be easier in a way to also price ethers when we get that EIP out into the future in a similar way like we tried to do with Bitcoin and its halvenings. And then it'll probably become easier to actually figure out what price ETH should be. That's what the market is trying to figure out right now. And as you know, it'll correct to the downside, it'll correct to the upside. So I personally see it going much higher than what we saw back in 2017, because there are real programs now, not just promises. And they're accruing billions of dollars. They're getting more mature. And we're finding which of those platforms like Uniswap are here to stay for the most part. They aren't rug pulls. Nobody has scammed everyone just yet. And if hundreds, if not thousands of smart developers have looked at the code themselves and audited it, major auditing companies who have been experienced in doing auditing for companies and ICOs since these years have gotten that experience and now looked at these smart contracts and said, no, they're fine. Or I'm going to make a better version of it and try to attract capital that way. So now it's just a point where Ether actually has use where it didn't have as much back then beyond just fueling further speculation in ICOs. which for the most part, ICOs dumped, right? They were trying to fund their company. They needed dollars or fiat currency to do so in order to rent an office building, hire a team, and pay them if they weren't paying in crypto, for many other things. So I think now, since we have these institutions, they're probably less likely to have as weak hands. They don't need to sell right away. They're literally investment products oftentimes. So they don't just sell at the first moment that they receive that cryptocurrency. It's not how it works. So that stability going into this next movement, I think, is extremely interesting. And I think that's going to be one of the problems with trying to time it, right? And to try to figure out when to sell. And actually, I want to ask you that. I want to turn the tables here. Since somebody asked me on Twitter, and I've been thinking about it kind of all morning, what do you think will be the sign that we are at the market top for you personally?
Well, I tell you what, in the end of 2017, going into November, December, I did start selling Bitcoin. And I mean, I gotta say, I was lucky. I was extremely lucky to be doing that. And I was able to regain my position between 2018 and into 2019. And I'm still holding it. So part of it, I'm jaded because I'm literally on house money. I'm not putting in hard-earned savings per se. I'm riding profits in a big way. And so I am, so what I'm willing to risk is maybe a lot more than somebody who has to purchase with money that they had to, put an hour in of time to earn. But I can tell you that the news around this current bull market is not the same as it was in 2017. And the hype is not there. We're seeing pretty exciting moves, but I just don't feel the same sort of hype. And I think this is a really long-term play. And part of the problem is, where else do you put your money? You sell and you're like, okay, you got overpriced stocks and just so many other things out there. I mean, I think gold is undervalued, but I mean, I still think Bitcoin and Ethereum are undervalued. So for me, having a target, picking a price and sticking to it is important. I mean, if you think Bitcoin can go to 100,000, you might be conservative with yourself and say, yeah, I'm going to sell between 50 and 75,000. You don't need to wait until it gets to where you think it can go.
Yeah.
You can sell before that and just know that you can be wrong. And accepting that you're not going to get it perfect is going to be a big thing on that. So I would say wait until things get really hyped up. I personally am not going to sell in this bull market. Like, I agree with you. I'm going to wait for it to crash again because I don't think this is the end. So I'm not going to answer the question specifically.
No, that was good.
But
that was pretty specific. Well, not
it's
price
tough.
target.
It's such a hard thing because it depends where you are, depends what your situation is, but I'm not going to sell in this bull market, and I don't know what the prices are going to be. I mean, this could be it until Bitcoin crashes. We might see it go back down now. I mean, we might see the markets crash, which takes the whole entire crypto space down with it in very short order. So it's impossible to know. I just know that I don't think we're done seeing that build out yet. And I think there's going to be a point where we achieve a certain level of stability because of the amount of capital that enters the space. And I think that's the point where we can say, okay, we've reached some sort of equilibrium in the price. And I don't think we're there yet. I think it's still very early stage.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's funny to start with a comment there that you left early on, is that you kind of find it difficult to add new money. But to me, it's kind of the opposite. Like, I wish I had extra money to throw into Bitcoin above all of the things. Because as you probably know, I've lived off of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and those gains pretty much since 2017. And man, is it nerve-wracking to consider how risky you're being with your position, because you are living off of that money. Just how much faith do you have in this? And at one point, I'll have to admit, even in the beginning of this year, I was thinking, man, I'm just going to have to get a job. I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't want to have to continue to sell crypto, because I do really honestly feel like it's going to bounce back, and it's going to go back to its old all-time high. But we're sitting at $3,000. We're in a pandemic, so suddenly it's more difficult to get a job. So at that point, I almost had to double down and just say, well, I'm going to just work harder on YouTube. I'm going to work harder on not spending as much money and being austere. And it was such a learning experience, because going into this next cycle, I'm thinking, I want to make money on the way down as much as I make money on the way up. So one of the things I'm going to try to focus on throughout this whole era that we're moving into or in right now is how to find those short positions. But then at the same time, you have to time that right for yourself. Futures might work well for that, but oftentimes they're for accredited investors, and you have to have quite a gumption about that too, because it's still very risky. But yeah, I still think there's going to be some time there before we have to consider that. But where do you put that money afterwards? You still have to keep it an investment product. Is it going to be gold, silver? Yeah, I think we're a ways away before that volatility, because I agree with you. It's going to be a while before we get maybe a $1 trillion market cap, was what I heard one analyst say, as when volatility will start lowering for at least Bitcoin specifically. But how do we stop all these new investment products and cryptos from garnering capital? That literally could take decades before we come to some sort of resolution on what to think about these new coins and whether they're going to be good investments or not. There are probably going to be pumps on coins for a long time. There are going to be people talking about coins, whether they're allowed to or not. And that money could still ultimately eke back into Bitcoin, even if that was new capital that's entering these other assets. And it won't move the price as much, which is good, but at least with Bitcoin, you'll be a little bit more secure at that point. So for me, that it functions as a reserve currency already, because it's been my savings account. It's just continued to grow, and I didn't know where else to put my money.
I know. Well, and then when you do get to that point where you want to sell, the good news is that hopefully, just like we're seeing, the gains are outpacing other assets by so much. I mean, it's much easier to buy $50,000 Dow Jones when you've just sold $100,000 Bitcoin, right? I mean, just let's be honest, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying that that's what you want to do, but if you can manage your expectations, we live in a everything bubble, and it's going to be hard to not have some casualties in this environment. I mean, you have to be diversified in some way or another. You know what I mean? It's just imperfect, and you have to accept that there's going to be casualties in your portfolio. I mean, you can't just get rid of all your dollars. You have to have some dollars, but know that inflation's coming. Own some gold, but you can't have everything in gold. Own some crypto and know that there's going to be volatility. And you know what? You probably should own some stocks too in this environment, because they might pump it to $50,000, $100,000 too, with all the money printing that they have going on. And you just have to be aware of that, and just and I think accept that to a certain degree. And again, that goes back to being prepared to be wrong, because I would tell you that I would think gold should go to the moon tomorrow, and that stocks should crater. I mean, that's what I would want to say based on what's going on, based on the economy at a grind, and seeing what we're seeing. But that's just not what happened, and you're ignoring the nuance when you don't accept some certain facts. You know what I mean?
Right. We have basically the put on the stock market where they don't want it to fall. So you feel safer in a way knowing that there's not going to be as much volatility. That's what it feels like. That's what the market consciousness, I think, is that it's safer because they won't let it fall. And they've basically agreed to continue buying things up. For example, I think it was just yesterday, they vowed to continue to keep buying bonds, the Fed that is, until we have full employment. What does that mean, full employment? So forever, basically. They announced forever they're going to be buying bonds and putting that put. In crypto, you don't necessarily have that. So I think that's what makes it risky and makes it a little bit safer to own stocks, because I don't know what I think in 10 years will happen, but I think in 10 years, they'll both be much higher, the stock market and Bitcoin or Ethereum. But at this point, you are really putting yourself open to a lot of risk by involving yourself in cryptocurrency. Even if you're new to cryptocurrency, you're more likely to get scammed because there are so many different kinds of scams. And unfortunately, people, even in this day and age, are not very smart about security. They click on those phishing links. They get greedy. That's the biggest problem. And unfortunately, crypto attracts a lot of greed because of what's happened with the price. And greed is one of the worst traps that you can have with cryptocurrencies, because you will probably get scammed. You'll fall for something. And that's a problem to me, because I've really worked hard to try to educate folks to not get scammed. And I've just had countless messages from folks just in the last few weeks about how they lost money through their MetaMask wallet, or they got rug pulled on some DeFi product. And then at that point, once you get scammed, it's kind of like what happened with you, not necessarily the same, but it's this need to get back to where you were, getting back to your position, which tends to make people take even bigger, riskier bets with leverage that can really destroy them financially. So I personally am not at the point where, if you look at that Wall Street cycle and you look at the chart at the top where it says, oh, everyone should buy this, I am a genius. That's what it says at the top. And at the bottom, it's like, oh, depression, I bought too much stuff, how am I going to pay for all this? It's funny how I almost felt that to a T going through the last cycle. So now I really agree that investors don't really focus on their feelings as much as they should, as well as a side topic. I think you should trust your gut, but I can't tell that to everybody, because if you haven't been in crypto long enough, you're not too smart about security. My gut is going to be different than your gut.
Resilience and financial resilience is so key, because in so many situations, how many times has just the simple time bailed us out? If you just hold on and not get shaken, but if you're in a situation where you're losing your business and you got to pay your bills, and you lose your assets, and then the markets move on without you, that's when you lose.
Absolutely. So I think what I'm trying to say there with that last part is also that I don't know that I would recommend to folks to even buy Bitcoin necessarily at this time as emphatically as I used to, or any cryptocurrencies. If they did, it would obviously be Bitcoin first, and I would recommend them to go to one of the top exchanges. But just trying to take custody of that, you open yourself up to so much risk. Is it safer that Coinbase is holding it when they've shown to be so careful with security? Or is it safer to keep possession of it and trust yourself with your security? I think you really have to level up your mindset first before you take possession of it. I think it's extremely important that you do, to keep those businesses honest, to make sure we don't have fractional reserve Bitcoin or anything like that, even though we likely already do. But I think that's good for the space overall. For you individually, you really have to think about yourself and how to protect your assets based on what you currently know. So at this point, I can't claim to know what everyone is thinking or everyone's level of experience. I wouldn't necessarily recommend. I don't think maybe I'll be crazy. So Kenneth, that's when we sell. When I'm telling everyone to buy Bitcoin and that's it, it's going to the moon, new paradigm. That'll be it. When I catch myself, or you catch me, or anyone catches me doing that, I think that'll be a key point to probably begin selling.
We'll text each other and say it's time to sell.
Yeah. Oops, I did that thing. I think we should consider taking some gains here. Yeah.
Omar, it was a pleasure having you on. I thought this was going to go 30 minutes, but we were just having such a good time chatting. I didn't want to cut it short. Thank you so much for coming on the show. If people want to learn more about you, the work you do, please let them know about your channel and anything you have going on that you would like to share with everyone.
Sure. I'm still doing the YouTube channel. I've been trying to stay consistent. It can be difficult, obviously, during the bear market, the bull market, but I've really tried to support my following and to let them know that there's someone there, at least trying to look out for them in some sort of way. So I do that on my YouTube channel, Crypto's News. So that's CRYPT0 apostrophe S News, or you can go to my Twitter, same thing with no apostrophe. And I'm frequently just sharing news there, sharing thoughts, and retweeting out the most interesting things that we're hearing about. That's a lot of the work I do, is just education, make sure that we're all on a level playing field of information. Especially since folks are so busy. I know there are people who drive around and everything else. So I like for them to have some sort of consistent source for information that has been around for a bit. So I'm still trying to provide that, do that on YouTube. And yeah, I'm stoked to continue narrating this cycle as we go through it, as I've done, and injecting little bits of experience and old news as I can along the way. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for having me. I'm always humbled when you invite me on the show, and I'm going to definitely check out your coming interviews, especially now with the focus on crypto. Are you going to be doing more crypto content, less? What do you kind of
You're
focus
the
on?
first one we've had that really focused on it. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be covering it more here. I know people are going to be seeking out information, and I mean, my goodness, we had such a balanced discussion, I think, today, because yeah, it's tough to just tell somebody, hey, it's still early, go out and dump all this money into it. But I still feel like if you want to get exposed to it a little bit, it goes a long way.
Yeah.
And so if getting familiar with the learning about it, because I don't think this is going away, and I still think it's very early. But everyone needs to make their own decisions on what they deem is responsible, and what you're comfortable with. So
Mm-hmm.
having said that, Omar, thank you so much for coming on the show with me today.
Same to you. Take care, Kenneth. Bye, everyone.